Noswaith da, croeso Brifysgol Glyndŵr, Mike Scott ydw I. I'm Professor Mike Scott, I'm the Vice-Chancellor of Glyndŵr University, and wish you a warm welcome tonight to this inaugural lecture. Glyndŵr University is a new university, and we are, we hope, breaking the mould as far as universities are concerned. Last week we opened the Centre for the Child. As I walked around the new Centre for the Child, which is a £2 million building, which is just to the rear of this building, I walked around with an expert in childcare and early education. And he said, I understand you think this is the best facility in Wales. I said, yes, I think it probably is. He told me it's actually the best facility in the United Kingdom, a new facility. Next week we open the Centre for the Creative Industries, which is at the front of the building. I had notice just today that the Vietnamese Television Corporation are actually sending a delegation of 10 people from the Vietnamese government and from the corporation to the opening of that building, and wish to go into partnership with us in terms of the training of TV people over in Vietnam. We're breaking the mould. We're breaking the mould in the kind of things that we're trying to do. Everything that we do has to be proven in practice. All our staff know that every course has to be developed now in partnership with business, industry, or the public sector. And so if we're doing that, we try to break the mould in a different way, in the people that we appoint. It's great for the universities, the old universities, to appoint professors who merely profess. That is what they're about in the old universities, and I've got the greatest respect for the old universities. But there's no point us replicating that. We want to appoint people who practice what they profess. And so we appoint people such as Karen Graham. Karen Graham, as you'll see from the biography that we've given out tonight, is someone who has practiced what she now professes and indeed continues to practice what she professes. She is, without doubt, one of the leading exponents in the whole of the United Kingdom in terms of early learning for children, from the ages of 0 to the age of 5. So much so that just quite recently I had a phone call from the office of the former Deputy Director of UNESCO in Paris that said, we are having a major conference of Nobel laureates in Morocco, in Fez, 1st, 2nd and 3rd of May. We want 2 of you to go. We'd like you to go, Professor Scott, as the Vice-Chancellor of this new university, but we would like you to bring with you Professor Karen Graham to talk with the Nobel laureates, 26 of them being brought to Fez with a select group of other academics from around the world. Professor Karen Graham is one of those people and will be involved in that think tank on May the 1st, 2nd and 3rd. So tonight she's going to profess tonight to you, or even confess tonight to you, I don't know, but she's going to talk to you about her work, about her vision, about the radical way in which we're looking at early learning years. Professor Karen Graham.
Good evening. It's amazing to see so many people here. Can you hear me at the back? I really appreciate that you've taken the time to come out this evening to hear this inaugural lecture, but it's really strange, an inaugural lecture, because it's probably the only time that you get your family watching as well. And this is their reward for all the years they've sat listening to me harp on about the things that excite me, that might not excite them in the same way. So this is their very special reward. So I hope that you enjoy it a little bit more than they've enjoyed perhaps the last 14 every meal time. So what are we going to talk about this evening? We're going to, we've looked at the audience as a very mixed audience, so hopefully we've got something for everyone. And what I want to talk to you about is how I became involved in work-based learning, the beginnings, because that really drums home why it's so important, and particularly important to me. And we're also going to talk about national vocational qualifications. We're going to go on in part 2 to the Credit and Qualification Framework and the challenges and the opportunities that offers us right now. And then we're going to look, for those of you who are employers, about how we can use all the information that it's out there at the moment to improve your offer in your workplace. But in doing so, how you can improve that symbiotic relationship between you and your employees so that everyone benefits. And importantly, everybody feels that they benefit, because that is critical to the relationship between both. So let's talk about beginnings. My introduction to work-based learning started in 1997 when I opened a daycare setting with my husband. We'd left education and I'd been used to working with teachers, looking at CPD. I'd been used to dipping in and out of universities, looking at CPD with staff there. And it was all very exciting. So it just seemed the right thing for me to pick up on the challenge of working with the staff in the nurseries and building something for the staff. But what I hadn't done when I'd sat with all the books and all of the documents and written a CPD plan and a business plan that was built upon all the theory was really understand the context and the culture of the whole of the sector. And what I needed to do, very quickly realised, was rip up everything I'd done, learn from the experience and move on. And that was starting to look at how many people are there in the workforce, in the children's workforce. Is there enough? No, there wasn't enough qualified people in the workforce to do what we wanted to do. So building from the qualifications we thought they had was not going to be good enough. We needed to start and say, well, how can we go back a step, and how can we actually start to give the staff what they need so that we can move forward with the staff, and then we can all build together something that was special and something that was different. But really, to do that, we needed to start to look again at the other part of the problem. And the other part of the problem we had was actually understanding learning in the workplace. Because it's very different to learning that happens in any other context, because it's real life. It involves children, which is a huge, huge responsibility, particularly somebody else's child. And it involves creating something, the whole culture that you want to build so that you get the improvements that you're looking for and the good people want to stay. And that was really critical, not just to what we wanted to do because we were building a business, but because we were building a socially responsible business that had impact on every single child and every single family that we were working with. Now, we knew that, and the staff that we employed knew that, because we made sure that that was the case. When we employed them, we were looking for attitude and aptitude. And then it was starting to say, well, now we have this as a base, how do we move forward and qualify the people we've got so that we get the balance that we're looking for and we get the level of qualification that we need. So we started to look at the function of people in the workforce, and we started to look at the qualifications that were available. And we started to really, really understand that work-based learning in all of its forms was the way to go. It offered us not just the challenges to keep people thinking and alive and interested in what they were doing, because we realised that when people are working and they're learning at the same time, they're thinking about what they're doing. We were not looking for robots. We were not looking for people who went and just did. We were not looking for people just to respond to instruction. Our children needed people who were going to be able to respond to them. And that's something entirely different, because they needed to be able to think about what they were doing, transfer the knowledge they had and apply it to every different situation. It's a challenge. And it's not one that the books really help with, because when each person is working with a child, they can't just robotically go through one step after another, because that expects that the child has read the book as well and knows how to respond. And they don't. Now, anyone who's got a child knows that. It's really, really important to be able to deal with every single child and every situation. We want thinking people, responsive people, and people who care. So some fast facts, if you're not entirely sure that work-based learning is important, because I do know that it doesn't get the credit and the esteem it deserves. As a nation, we're scoring low. 17th in Europe here, 18th on intermediate skills, 12th on higher level skills. That's because we tend to invest in people at higher levels. Well, what does that say about our thinking? Is it really that we don't value people who are doing lower level qualifications enough? And shouldn't we be investing more? Because people are people and children are children, whether they're 8 in a classroom or 2 in a daycare setting. Shouldn't we invest the same amount at least? Because there's a lot of evidence to say we should be investing more in the early years. Maybe we should think about it a little bit differently. But if we're saying economically that 1 in 8 have no qualifications, these are the latest figures we could get, the 2009-10, but more than a quarter are not skilled to level 2. That's a worry, because even if we look outside of the childcare setting, and if you don't believe that working with young children is really important, and there are a lot of people who don't, then maybe what we should be saying is, how are we going to respond as an economy? How are we going to compete in Europe and globally? And if we can't do that and we can't compete with England maybe for business for Wales, how are we going to manage it all? Because isn't that a spiral downwards? Shouldn't we be thinking differently and saying, what are the qualifications we can afford to invest in so we get more out of our workforce, out of the economy, and how can we strengthen it for everyone? But if you're still not convinced, and you think that work-based learning qualifications, and we are talking MVQs largely here, that dirty word, when we're thinking about that, then if you're not aware of what's going on, in City and Guilds alone, albeit the largest awarding body, there are 500 qualifications, 26 industries represented currently, 2,500 organisations, and 1.8 million people at any one time working towards a qualification, predominantly at levels 2 and 3. But that picture is changing, and we'll come back to that a little bit later. But that's enough to convince me we should be taking this seriously. And there are markets out there that we could be contributing to, perhaps. Do we think that the government in Wales thinks it's important that we invest at levels 2, 3 and 4? I hope it does, because otherwise it's throwing away £128 million over the next 3 years. And if it isn't really going to be worth that much, then they can give me a few million and I'll make it worth something somewhere else. It is important, hugely important, and if the government considers that it's that important and this expenditure is in Wales only, then how much more is being spent by industry? How big is the picture, and what should we be contributing? But you see, it's all about competency, and this is where I learned a lot when I moved into daycare, because I was teaching before. And probably like a lot of other people, I thought, well, qualifications are great, they're really important, and we start on this road to higher level qualifications all of the time, don't we? It's good to have higher level qualifications. It's good to go one step further. If you want to secure a job, get a degree. If you want to secure a better job, you need a master's, maybe a PhD. And it's almost like this diploma race we've heard about again and again. But is that what the economy needs? Because I think sometimes we need to stand back and question, what is it we need to perform to help families out of poverty, to help organisations become stronger to compete, to work as a community. What do we need? Is it always higher? Is higher always better? And I don't think so, because as adults and as we get older, our learning profile particularly is very spiky. We might be level 8 in one area, and that's great, but if you look at where we are in other areas, it doesn't mean we have to be level 8 or 4 or 5 or 6. So, for example, you know, my PhD is level 8 and my passion is work-based learning. It's about making a difference, having impact. That's what I want to do. But I remember a few years ago we bought a lawnmower, a sit-on lawnmower. It was great. Yeah, I started off at about level 1. I got to about level 2 in terms of competency. And really what we're looking for, of course, is consistent competency, the ability to transfer experience and knowledge and make it work. And I was doing all right until I reversed into the greenhouse and shattered not just the greenhouse, but any claim to consistent competency. And that's what worries me, because when we start thinking we have to be one step higher, we miss the opportunity to gap fill, to broaden what we do, and to fill those small gaps in knowledge and understanding and competency that makes a huge difference to how we work together. And again, I'll come back to that in how we build a workforce later. But if you're still not convinced, have you ever met a bad plumber? Yeah, that makes you think, doesn't it? Competency matters sometimes, doesn't it? Yeah, it doesn't matter if you've got a degree, of course, and you've got a job where you can go and you can use those skills, because degrees are really good. But it's still handy if your plumber is better than level 2 or 3, isn't it? Or at least can meet those requirements. Competency is important. And if that doesn't convince you, what about the person working with your child? Should they be competent? Because I know there are plenty of times that I've been out with staff from active childcare or from any other training, any other nursery or organisation, and I've gone to courses, and I've gone to courses at level 2 or 3, and people don't know I've got a degree, and that's okay, because they shouldn't. There's no reason why not. We're all going to learn together, same level stuff, and we're treated as if we've all had a lobotomy. It's dreadful. And once we were at a food hygiene course, and someone said, oh, but these people, they work in I think it was a sandwich place, but you're just nursery workers there. You get that all the time. What a statement to make about the people who are investing in people, the people who are investing in the future. We're talking about needing to respond to the current economic situation. These are the people who are going to be paying our pensions in a few years' time. Shouldn't we be investing more in them? And shouldn't we have more respect for people who work with people? Because I think they deserve so much more. But if you're so far away from children and you don't think it matters, this could be any one of us, couldn't it? Any one of us needing support at any time, any one of us needing care at any time. It could be you, it could be someone in your family, it could be your parent. Now what matters? Does competency matter now? Or can we say, actually we've got a qualification and it's okay because we don't have to be competent? Because that's what we're hearing in some of the discussion forums as employers. People coming back to us and in that forum saying, you know, we don't think we need to consider competency. We've got a different qualification, a higher qualification, a better qualification. We don't need to do this because we've all trained to be managers. We haven't trained to have to think about doing this job at level 2 or 3. How can you manage something if you don't know how it feels? How can you manage something if you don't understand what it takes to get it right? And it's a worry for me that we think anything differently because, again, people matter. And if this is you or someone in your family, they matter. So I think it's about professional respect, and I think we need to get a balance now between what we want from our qualifications and what we're trying to promote. Because maybe, And in many degree programs, there are the competency as a requirement, but maybe we should consider what we're needing as an economy, how we respond to it, and how we model what we give to people. Because after all, what we're doing is providing a service. But what about the MVQ situation? What about what it feels like to be involved in MVQs? Because the competency-based qualifications are MVQs, generally at levels 2 or 3. And when they were introduced, many years ago, in the 80s, when they were introduced to respond to an economic situation that allowed people to transfer the skills they had in the workplace, to accredit those skills and give recognition so they could move from one job to another. That's fantastic, isn't it? People had mobility, people had flexibility, they were able to use what they know, and then someone was able to say, great, well done, you've achieved that. I understand that these qualifications have been developed by sector skills councils. They're checked, they're robust. You can use that information, you can build on it, or you can develop horizontally and do something different. You can come into our workplace, and I know that this certificate says that you've achieved this level and you can do this job. So the workforce became more mobile. And that's fantastic, because that's what we need. If people are losing jobs, we need to be able to know that they're going to be able to get another job and someone's going to recognise what they can do. Because it's about competency. The MVQ is built with a requirement for knowledge, a requirement for competency. And when you can do both, you develop your understanding. Bring both of them together and you understand better how to use that knowledge and how to transfer it. Not just within your own workplace, but across the workplace. And that's what we want people to do, isn't it? So what's the problem with qualifications that are MVQs? I've often wondered this. Is it because there is an issue with how it's assessed? Very transparent, and people think there are issues, they think they're easy. Is it because they are levels 2 and 3 largely when they were introduced? Is it a little bit about hierarchy? Quite possibly. Because if you work in law, which is again about competency, then, my daughter's smiling, she's a solicitor, if you're doing that, then people don't question that. They expect your solicitor to be competent. Well, at least you hope they are, don't you? You expect people who are in medicine to be competent, and you pray that they are. But what are we saying about levels at 2 and 3? Are we saying it really doesn't matter? And if it really doesn't matter, why bother? So I wonder whether the issue that we have with qualifications is how we think about hierarchy. And I really wonder whether we should stop and think about all of those people when they first started MVQs. What impact did it have and does it have on those people when we all give the impression that those qualifications don't really matter? How would you feel? Because I think the difficult qualifications are not the ones you get when you're in your 30s and 40s and you've already done a few. You know, a PhD requires an awful lot of input. It's frustrating at times, it's maddening at times. You don't always want to do it because Christmas might come and you're thinking, oh, I've got that to do. And it becomes that thing that's hanging all over you all the time. It's over your shoulder, it's a cloud here because you know you've got to finish, and it takes determination. But I don't think we can even begin to ask ourselves, what does it take if you are perhaps 40s, you need to get out to work because you've got to provide for your family, you feel de-skilled, you take a job, and for the first time you embark on a qualification. And you've got all these young people with a question mark over you thinking, you know, I've got qualifications you haven't. How am I going to feel? How do I feel in that situation? Worried? Concerned? It's a huge step, far bigger on that first part of the learning journey than perhaps a PhD, because it's a threat. It really is a threat. And to have people say, well, it's only an MVQ, what an awful thing to say. And God forbid that any of us educators would say that, because we know the first steps to learning are important. And if we're talking about working towards a model of lifelong learning, we really have to get to the emotion of this. Does it matter? Yes, of course, it really, really matters, but our perception matters. And I think we should reflect on what we offer people and the strengths that we bring as educators and say, well, let's think very carefully about how we promote and how we perceive all qualifications. And let's give clarity to what we're asking for. Let's give parity to esteem for all of this. And let's respect what everyone has to offer. I don't think we're quite there yet, but I think we've got the answer. Because if we look in the childcare sector alone, not even touching the health and social care sector, which shares similar issues, if we look in the childcare sector, in 2006, David Dallimore did a review of qualifications, and the review of qualifications that were live in the sector at that time, there were 1,800. Now, that's not 1,800 that you can go out and take right now. That's 1,800 that people in the workforce might hold. If you're an employer, how do you work out which one's right for you? How do you even begin to ask, is this person qualified or not? And I know there's always a question mark at times, because people will give me a ring and they'll say, Karen, got a bit of an issue here. We've got someone who seems really good, really like this person, thinks she'll be great at the job, and they've got this certificate. Can you tell me, are they qualified? Because it hasn't been that clear. But if you're bound by regulation that requires that you have a percentage of people at level 2 and 3 in the workforce, you need to be able to work out, are they qualified or not for the job? Because employers have been using that as a different question to, are they good enough to do the job? And can I do anything with the qualifications they've got? So, what we have is a great stuff, lots of brilliant qualifications, wonderful things, hidden in a very, very messy web of reality. And the answer is simplicity, organisation, and a filing system, which brings us to part 2 of this lecture, because this filing system is a new credit qualifications framework, and I am so excited about this. I am a geek, mind, but I am very excited about this. If we look at higher education, lifelong learning, and general and vocational education at the top there, imagine them as 3 filing cabinets. And neatly tucked away are different types of qualification. And for the workforce and work-based learning qualifications, we're generally talking about vocational education and training. These qualifications, they are working more to promote the flexible workforce we talked about when we first talked about MVQs. The whole idea is that they will remove barriers to progression and encourage new learning, because the wonderful thing about these, the qualification framework, is that if you do any size learning, it counts. It's open to all, and it allows everyone, whether it's a young carer or someone who's been in the workforce for a while and thinks, actually, I might decide I'll take that first step and I'll get a qualification, but do you know, I'm not going to go for the whole qualification because it's a little bit threatening, but I'll dip my toe in the water and I'll just do a module, I'll just do a unit, see how I get on, I might build on it later. It actually provides for those, because what we've done at the same time is change the structure of the qualifications. And so every credit is 10 hours of learning, and we've got new qualifications to fit in to the qualification framework. And the new qualifications are award, certificate and diploma. So it doesn't matter what sort of qualifications you're doing. If you're an employer or a learner, you know by the title of the qualification, the size of the qualification, award, certificate or diploma, and you've also got a level attached to it as well. So you know what level you're working towards, and if you're an employer or someone who's in a training organisation, or if they come to university, We will know what type of learning they've done and at what level. So much easier to deal with. So an award is 1 to 12 credits, just in case you're wondering. A certificate, 13 to 36, and a diploma, 37 plus. But it's a little bit more than that, because we've got people out there all the time talking about this new credit qualification framework. And what they've missed, or what seems to have been missed, is one of the most exciting opportunities available to all of us. Because in doing all of the credit checks, in doing all of the qualification restructuring to keep it in line with what the sector needs now, and we've been working on that for 2 years, delighted to say it's finished. In doing all of that, they did something that was really, really challenging. They changed the name of the qualifications, so we don't have MVQs anymore. It's the same sort of thing. You've still got competency in the qualifications, you've still got knowledge in the qualifications, a little bit of restructuring, some playing around, making sure it's up to date. It's the same sort of thing. It's based on competency. And I thank God that in Wales we fought to hold on to competency, because we thought we were going to lose it to knowledge-based qualifications only. But the thing they did that offers us the opportunity and the challenge is they changed the name of the qualifications to award, certificate, diploma. MVQs will have gone. They'll still count if people have got them, but they've gone. And a straw poll of employers tells us that these qualifications suddenly have huge value, because they're not MVQs anymore, they're diplomas. Isn't it about perception? Yeah, marvellous, fantastic changes. So glad the MVQs have gone. But you know, the rider on the end of that was we just need to make sure that people can do what they say they can do. What do they want? They want the MVQ, but they want a different title because the perception was poor. It's all about perception. It's all about marketing, isn't it? But when I talked about challenges and opportunities, I think there's huge, huge opportunities for how we play with these qualifications. Because now, it will become normal for people to add on for CPD. Get some more units. You've done your qualification, you're going to build on that. Get a unit, get a module. Use it for CPD. Add it, build it onto something else. And if you're in one part of the workforce, you leave for whatever reason and you come back into the workforce, you can just add modules and enter a different part of the workforce, because we have what's called rules of combination. I won't go into that because it can be complicated if you've only just been introduced to this. But what we're doing is working the best of the qualification structure so that people can become employed and people don't duplicate the learning. And so every bit of learning means something. And that's as it should, isn't it? Every bit of learning counts. Formal, informal, we're working on that too. And on the qualification framework, there's a fantastic bit that's hidden in there somewhere, which is about innovation. That's a whole other lecture. I won't go into that, but that's fantastic too. But responding to change and responding to the offer that's out there is going to be something that we're going to be doing at all levels. We're not going to be stopping at level 2 and 3. Because onto that qualification, we've got level 4, we've got level 5, and we actually have already some level 6. So we need to be doing that everywhere. We need to be responding to the challenge, building in and seeing where is it best. I think we're going to find the university out there. We're already out there, just in case you didn't know. We're already out there. But we're going to be out there more. We're going to be out in businesses. We're going to have the opportunity to just be everywhere. Expect to see Glyndŵr in places that you never even dreamed of in the future. Because why? Because we respond to challenge and we think ahead. And isn't that what's needed? Because every time we're working with a baby, we're thinking about what that baby's going to need when they're 5. If we're working with an adult in the workplace situation, isn't one of the questions you ask, what's the pathway? Where are you going to with this? How can I help get you where you want to go? And it's not always about now. And so a few years ago, if you thought you were going to get away without the centre being plugged, A few years ago, we talked about possibilities for a different nursery, and then the university took on something entirely different and shaped the potential to move out of what was described to me as a greenhouse. They didn't say that when it was open, did they? But they took on this challenge and shaped it into something completely different. And last week, the Centre for the Child, Family and Society opened. And why is it the Centre for the Child, Family and Society when it's a childcare organisation? Because it was built and shaped by the university into something different. We knew at the time that everything was going on that qualifications may change. But what the university did was use it as an opportunity and say, well, just in case it does change, the university will shape something that will work for the future of the for the whole of the workforce. And the university did just that, because what it did is say, right, well, we know we're going to be short of places. Where are all the students going to go when the qualifications need to develop, change? We're going to have placement shortages. We're going to have opportunities to develop the workforce in different ways. So the building was built around that. And then right now, it's shaped something entirely different, because you don't know where you're going. You think you know where you're going, and then opportunities come along and you take them, don't you? You see them and you get excited by them and you think, yes, I think we can do that. So last week we opened with a very slim foundation to the Centre for the Child, Family and Society, and we're starting to get such great partnership working. So where is it now? Where is the centre? Within the university, we're working with psychology, with Amir Williams to look at moral development in young children, Karen Roscoe and Sandra Goring from Wrexham to look at integrated family working, with Sue Thornton and Simon Hall, which is great, looking at augmented books. Who would have thought, when the university was deciding to change provision, that we would all be looking to something that is completely different and working with creative industries? It's about using opportunities, but we can build qualifications into this. We can find a few. Locally, we're working with partnerships in Kaya Park, wonderful people doing wonderful things. Regionally, working with Tricia Jones and Gail Bennett on parenting strategies and providing qualifications across Flintshire, Denbighshire and Wrexham. And then offering advice to different departments at the Welsh Assembly Government and working with NUCIS to look at how employers nationally are going to be able to amend their policies a bit so that people who work for them are going to be able to manage their caring role and their work all learning, which again is incredibly important, because we do know that people in poverty need support, and a lot of the people who are living in poverty are in poverty because they take on a caring role, and it limits what they do in their workplace if they're able to work at all. Internationally, we're working with the University of Graz. We're sharing information with different partners. We have a whole host of different opportunities across Europe to look at different forms of research, and we've been invited to contribute to some work for the United Nations, which is looking at creativity, and then to speak at the World Forum on two interesting topics. One of them is how we communicate and the role of academics in communication, and the other one is looking at innovation and play in the workplace as an adult. How do we get creative adults thinking differently so that we can create what we need within the workforce? Because we've got to step outside of the box, and we've got to be prepared to stand up, be counted, and also prepared to not fail, but not be seen as always right. Can't be frightened to be a little bit wrong at least. And so that's where we are now. But this happens, it's not one person doing any of this. It's whole teams of people, and that's what makes it exciting. That's what gives it its life. That's what gives it the pulse, and that's what sets the pace. Because that's what we're going to need to do if we're all going to adapt and to change by what's on offer. Because for those of you who are employers in the audience, the organisation is central to local, regional, national and international activity. No matter how much we try, we can't move away from that because it's impacted on. Every organisation, no matter how small, is impacted on by all of these different levels of activity, no matter how small. And if you're not convinced, think of someone in catering. What happens if the ships don't make it to deliver the foodstuffs they need? You know, what happens if the price of fuel, as it has done, goes up to the prices regionally? It all has impact and we can't ignore it. But we need to know for each individual business what sort of impact that's going to have. And we've got to be prepared to change, because if you look at that model, any organisation at the centre is going to have a web of links, just some of them fine, some of them stronger, reaching out into regional, local, international and national levels of activity, policies, practices. Those webs are going to be there. And when it starts to change, if you don't change with it, they're going to be broken. If one of them stands still, they break the chains, they weaken the links, and there's a potential for a downward spiral. So we've got to be prepared to say, where are we in this and how are we going to move? If we don't move, we lose pace. If we lose pace, we lose pulse. If we lose pulse, we die. It's simple, isn't it? And so we move on to stage 3, phase 3 of this lecture, and we're going to talk about organisations now. For those of you who are interested, those employers who are interested in how do we do something in our settings, in our organisations, no matter how big, how small, whether the organisation is a very small micro business, medium-sized business, a large organisation, or whether it's a whole service. How do we build that so that it's protected? How do we offer security to make sure that we protect services, levels of service, jobs, and at the same time, how do we inspire creativity so we build something fantastic and something different? I have a view, and have done for many years, that you can throw money at organisations. And at times when there's lots of money available, people will say, I need more people. If I want to do that, I need more people. Give me something else. Give me a resource. I think times of economic crisis offer the opportunity for creativity, because it makes us stop and it makes us think. It makes us ask, how do we use the resources? Because we can't afford to just throw more. How can we be more efficient, but at the same time, can we become more effective? And I believe very, very often we can. As a training organisation involved in one, we've won all sorts of awards and things because people, and very high esteem for the work that's being done, because we're prepared to say, can we be more effective and more efficient? And usually we can. So when we're talking about foundations, what are the foundations? How do you build your organisation to make sure that the framework that you offer your staff, because that's what we're talking about here, how do you put something in place so your workforce is able to securely work with you? And I really believe it's about direction. But it's being clear in your direction. How do you get where you want to go? Well, first of all, you've got to tell people, of course. People have to buy into the vision, otherwise why would they want to work with you? Because they don't know where you're going. And if they don't know where you're going, then they're never going to help you get there. And if they're really not that bothered, would you want them anyway? So set your vision, offer direction, and then build the foundations, because this is about leadership and management. And the issues associated with leadership and management are huge, and I know that. And I know we can talk about theories of management, theories of leadership all night. Don't worry, I won't. But when we're talking about these things, how do we actually set the foundations so they're strong enough? And I think it's about offering a framework. You need to say not just where you're going and how you're going to get there, but how people will fit into that so that it's clear, it's consistent, it's strong, and people know what is required of them. Because if people know what's required of them and it's enforced, then it's not about being a horrible organisation. It's about that security, and not just for people who are doing as they've been asked to do. It's not just about that. It's about making sure that people keep to the vision, so you protect everyone who's working with you. Recently I was working with an authority and we were trying to work out a solution to a problem. And one of the problems they had in one of the services was huge, because it was costing them hundreds of thousands of pounds. And the hundreds of thousands of pounds that was being cost every year was caused by a simple miscommunication of the notion of independence. Massive, massive problems, because everyone uses the same words but with different meaning. And it was a huge problem. It kept a lot of people in a lot of jobs 2 years ago, but it contributed to 40% reduction in employment for people this last year, because it's not sustainable. The foundations have to be built so that what you're offering is sustainable. And it has to be realistic. Because when you're talking about management structures and leadership, very often people will say, "Ah, yes, but isn't that the problem? Because if someone's a really, really good leader, people will follow them anywhere, won't they?" But the response to that is quite simple, because we're not looking for lemmings. We don't want people to walk over a cliff with somebody else. We want thinking, engaged people who are going to make a difference. And you don't get that by having someone who's so charismatic that people will follow them over a cliff. You get that when people are encouraged to think about where they want to be and how they want to be there, the difference they want to make and how they fit into the organisation. That's how I believe we get good leaders. Because you can lead in any direction. You can lead in the wrong direction. So use the workplace as a learning organisation and keep people engaged. For the childcare sector and the health and social care sector, it's very regulation driven. So we need to make sure that on the one hand, we've got the regulations in line with national standards, because you know they're written like that anyway. If it fits one, it should fit the other. So it's standardised interpretation there. That shouldn't ever be an issue. If you can get your workplace standards minimally to match these, and they should anyway, because all we're talking about is literally a triangulation of standards there, then it's easy, because when someone is doing a qualification in your workplace, if it's level 2 and you work through these areas, they're going to do it by doing a good job. It's that simple. If you want someone working at level 3, largely supervisory level, then you've got your regulations and it tells you what is required of someone at level 3. The national standards, the qualification standards, tell you what a level 3 looks like and what it should be like in the workplace. They should match. They're doing the job for you. And then you've got your workplace standards. If they're at least level 3, it's a win-win, because one of the biggest issues we have is who's learning for who. If the regulation demands a qualification, then people say, and we hear it all the time, "I'm doing this for you." And the employers are saying, "Well, actually, I'm investing in you." And it becomes an imbalanced argument all of the time, and everyone feels like they're losing. If you bring them together and they're doing the qualification in line with the workplace standards, then there's no conflict. But when we start people on the learning journey, we have to start saying to them, who's the qualification for? And if ever you're not convinced who it's for, remember, from an employer's perspective, if you're really not able to convince somebody, just say, "What do you do with the certificate if ever you leave?" You take it with you, don't you? What does the certificate allow you to do? It allows you to get the wage that is commensurate with that level of work. You're investing in your employees, but part of the structure is helping the employees to understand that it is an investment in them and it is something that's worth having. And it has been done, and when you look at the standards that people reach and what they can do, and you see the sort of fantastic jobs people are prepared to do, you realise that it's about keeping the balance all the time, constantly investing and reinvesting in the balance between what you need and what I need, what an employer needs and what an employee needs. And when the balance is right, everyone's happy. When it shifts, that's where it goes wrong. But sometimes it's again about laying foundations for individual learning. So what do we do? Have your induction right. If you set your foundations, people know what they're buying into, they know what job they're coming into, they know what path the organisation is on, they know what structure they're going to be working in, then induction's easier, but it should include responsibilities that everyone has. Health and safety, the legal responsibilities, and then employer rights and responsibilities. Get it balanced, because if people know what they're responsible for and their contribution to the workplace, then it's simple. And as hard as it is, some people may decide to go. But in the childcare workforce or in the health and social care workforce, people don't generally mind, because if someone doesn't want to deliver the right standard of care, should they be there anyway? So employer rights and responsibilities, then sector-related qualifications. Do you remember at the very beginning I said it's really important to get the people with the right attitude and aptitude and qualify them later if you need to? Well, sector-related qualifications fall into that, because if you've got the attitude and the aptitude, you can get a qualification. It doesn't always work the other way around. And then what we do in a lot of the work that I'm doing and a lot of the work that colleagues are doing elsewhere, we add in customer service. And people say, why on the earth would you do customer service? Because they've just got a level 3 or a level 2 or a level 4. Why do you do customer service? What's the point? And it has been fascinating over the years to watch what happens, because they employ the knowledge and the skills that they use in the sector-related qualification in a different way. It really embeds the learning, but it really makes people think, because the customers are not just external customers. And they're not just the children maybe, or the health and social care client that they're working with. It's the team. How do we respond to each other? How do we respect each other? So we add, and I would recommend adding customer service at every level. So if you do a level 2 qualification, support it with level 2 customer service. Level 3, do the same. Level 4, do the same. Same qualification, different level, different context. The results are amazing. Absolutely recommend it to anybody. Then look at management. Most people don't even think about management until someone gets to at least level 3, because they don't need it, do they? We've been doing level 2 management for years. If you know someone is a potential manager and they're interested in management, and in the supervision that you have all the way through, it's critical. It's just part of the health and social care and childcare workforce. Supervision with staff, helping decide which direction you're going to go. If you see someone who may be a potential manager, start your succession management now and do your management early, because managers need to progress. The skills that start slowly, they build slowly. And you can ask anyone that we've worked with in childcare how tough it is, because management isn't easy. What about those deep breath moments, we call them, when you're mentoring somebody and they haven't done something for the first time, and I can see it's resonating because I can see people smiling here. It's really hard, isn't it? You go in and your heart's in your mouth and you're really worried and you can't show it and your stomach might be turning. If you're not mentoring someone and if you're not teaching people about management, how are they going to know? Is it a secret we keep until it's afterwards and then just, oh yeah, it's always like that, isn't it? Why don't you tell someone before and help them? Isn't it easier to do that? Doesn't it help keep people on the right track? And I can see different people smiling because people have been there and they know what it feels like. But we need to engage people with emotion through this, because we need to know, what does it feel like on the first step there? And if it's management, it's the first step there, isn't it? It's still that same feeling, it's still the same threat. So, question marks at the end, that's the choice, isn't it? When we're working with people, we don't know where they're going, but they will know what path they're on in the beginning, and it's our job to help them get there. If it's in line with the organisational needs, if it's in line with the framework, if it's in line with the structure, then we can do it, can't we? Because we might get something really different, and this is where all the creativity and the innovation and all the other stuff might happen. This is where the unexpected happens, and it's no threat to any of us if someone goes and does something fantastic. It's just fantastic. Isn't it great to have it there? Because we can't all do everything. It's no threat here if someone can go and do something 10 times better than you or me, because there's always going to be many, many people who can do something 50 times better. But wouldn't it be great to be there to see it? Wouldn't it? So learning's not a threat. No one's a threat. It's just about working together, because when we get all of these in one workplace, bring them all together, and they're all different because everyone learns differently. We work into different learning styles. What you see is this huge web of fantastic activity where people are thinking about the workplace, they're thinking about the children, they're thinking about the people they work with. And it's exciting, it's vibrant, it's got pulse. The foundations, the direction sets the pace. It's the people who are delivering, the people who are learning, the people who engaged, who give our organisation the pulse. And we need to keep it alive. And it's the people who are leading who keep it alive. But that means doing the tough stuff too. And be inspired. This is my final note, be inspired, because everyone has bad days. I'll bet you there isn't anyone in this room who hasn't had a bad day. But if you know the direction you're going, and if you know the path you're on, and if you're determined enough, no matter what happens along the way, you'll get there. And there'll be lots of people who help you get there. And on a good day, when everything's working wonderfully and everyone's together, it's easier to see it. But wherever you are, at whatever level that you're working at, whoever you're working with, if you look around you, if you choose to do that, because we can choose to be negative or we can choose to be positive, we look around and we can be inspired by anything that's happening at any one time. In any one day, there'll be something there that inspires us, and I think we need to look at that. And I think we should do our best to be just a little bit inspiring too, because it matters. And in health and social care and childcare, it matters more because people matter. We matter and you matter. And if you look around this room right now at all of the people who are involved in these sectors, then you will see hundreds of people, or people, who deal with hundreds of people across a very wide area. I know people from a very wide area here tonight that will make a difference, that will have impact, and it will show other people we care. That's a huge network investing in humanity and in society, isn't it? So well done to all of you, and thank you.
Well, Karen, that's great, inspiring inaugural lecture. Thank you very much indeed. We're going to take some questions now. I'm going to hand the microphone over, so if you just put up your hand and we'll select you.
Could you tell us more about the Worldwide Forum, Professor Graham, please?
The World Forum happens once every other year. People from across the world come together and they're talking largely about childcare issues. One of the things that I really like about the World Forum is that we're not talking lots of money, although we talk to some. We're talking to different organisations. From, at the moment, I'm talking to people in Malaysia and the Philippines. I'm talking to people in Canada, in California, a whole range of different countries. And what we're talking about are issues that are similar around the world and how we can overcome some of these difficulties, how we can, as a community, work together as a team. We don't even really know each other, obviously, or we're getting to know each other, but over time. But how we can overcome these difficulties and what solutions each country brings. And it's quite interesting because it is a challenge to how we communicate. And that's what I'm really inspired to look at the moment, because I think we've got it wrong. And I think one of the things that we're doing at the moment is we're talking to each other and we're using similar language, different meaning, and we're talking about promoting different sorts of practice across the world, but when we actually go to see it, it looks different to the way it was intended. So I think what we should do, if aiming to profess about anything is correct, what we should be doing is using different modes of communication to get the message across. And that's what I'll be talking about at the World Forum. How can we responsibly get a message across to people at all levels so that we have the greatest level of impact? But it's a wonderful sort of venue. We're going to Hawaii this time, and we can't complain at that. But it's a really good opportunity for people to come together and share practice. And this year particularly, there was a request from people in India who were saying that there is an issue with play, for example, and young children and having no resources. And so we're talking about opportunities, because I don't think we need tons of resources anyway. And so we're just sharing ideas on how that might be taken forward. Any questions?
Well,
No question?
Well, if you do want to talk to me, I'll be here afterwards.
Okay, well, Karen will be here outside now, and there's a glass of wine and some nibbles out there, so talk among yourselves, and also talk to Karen about this. The whole idea comes down to something that we believe in here at the university, so it's going against traditional university culture, which is to say that education